Welcome into the Room for Improvement podcast here on CBS42.com. I am Josh Zavadil, and I am joined, as always, by Sebastian Posey, sitting across the table from me. How you doing today?
I'm good. How about you, Josh?
I'm doing well. I am at work, and I am talking to you, so I guess I'm doing pretty well. We have a lot of content coming out throughout the course of this week. As many of you are probably aware, April is a big month for the state of Alabama, just in terms of what has transpired over the past 3 years. And this coming Sunday, April 27th, it will have been 3 years since a string of storms ravaged much of the state. And we have a lot of different things planned throughout the week, just kind of reflecting on the state of, I guess, the state of Alabama, but in some of these cities 3 years after such a magnificent, enormous storm hit Tuscaloosa, and there was one that hit Cordova, Coleman, and impacted a lot of lives. And we're going to be bringing you all of those on CBS42.com, which brings me to April 27th itself, 3 years ago, almost. Where were you, Sebastian?
I was at work that day. I was already here at CBS 42, and I remember at the time I was not in the position I am in now. I was in a different department, so we were all basically told you can go home. It was one of those kind of things where it was a weird feeling because we're in when you think of a news station, you think of all hands on deck, but there are departments that aren't on the forefront of that. They're the kind of the administration department. So a lot of us went home just to get as safe as we could, just in case, because we'd been hearing all week, or we'd been hearing, at least especially the last day or so, how bad this could be. So I remember going home and sitting in my apartment, and it was one of those things where I kept hearing about, like, there was bad storms here, there was bad storms there, but you weren't seeing it. And I remember I'd flipped on our channel for just to see kind of what everything was, and it was about 5:10 that night, and then I saw Mark Prater in front of the biggest thing I'd ever seen. It was in Tuscaloosa, a place that I lived for a long time, that even to this day I still consider my second home. And it was just going through the town, and all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, I'm seeing a storm and feeling a connection to it, because it's this huge, massive thing clawing through an area that is near and dear to me. And I remember I just dropped to my knees watching it, hoping that, somebody's getting hurt in this, but you just are hoping that it's nobody that it's nobody that, I know, is please just don't, because I had a lot of friends still down there at the time, and I was just please don't hurt any of them. And I dropped to my knees and I started praying, because I was terrified in my apartment, in my safe place away from the storm, and I was terrified of it.
I was in Tuscaloosa, as you know, when the storm actually hit. That day I had been going about my regular business as a college kid. I was preparing for a final exam paper that I had due for one of my upper level classes that night, and I was procrastinating, and I had not written it. It was due. The final was at 5, so I knew there were bad storms coming, so I was like, I'm just going to be lazy about this. Normal college kid stuff, didn't really put a lot of thought into it. Had a meeting out at the Ferg, and I went and met with my friend there, and we commented when we were leaving the Ferg, because it was really, really humid outside, and we knew that there was supposed to be bad weather. And I had been checking Twitter and realized that there had been some people killed in a storm in Mississippi. And over the past couple weeks before April 27th, there had just been quite a few tornado warnings and just bad storms in the city. And we both made the comment that it's unreal that it's at that time of year, at least when I was a student, that time of year there always seemed to be some type of severe weather threat that impacted your plans as a student, whether it meant you had to be, you didn't know whether you're going to have class at a certain time because there was severe weather potentially coming in for the next day. It was just something that we had noticed that had been a lot more common over that month. And so I went back to my apartment and turned on the news, and my brother was playing Xbox. I made him turn it off. We turned on the news, and we actually turned on CBS 42, and we were watching it. We watched this tornado basically form, as you said. I mean, it basically formed. Mark Prater and Marlon Price and Lee Garner were there atop Woods and Water, yeah. Caught this thing forming, and it dropped to the ground, and I took a picture of it, not thinking anything of it, thinking, oh, it's not going to hit anywhere. I didn't know where it was. So, it's not going to hit anywhere near us. So I took a picture of it and I tweeted it out and said, "Wow, guys, look, a tornado in Tuscaloosa." Partly scared, partly joking, as I have a reputation for doing on Twitter. And just a few minutes later, we're watching this, and Mark Prater mentioned one of the landmarks near where my apartment complex was, and I looked at my brother and said, "We need to go to the bathroom." So we grabbed 2 chairs and we went to the bathroom. Not the normal tornado thing that you do. Usually you get a mattress or something, but we weren't thinking. We didn't think it was going to hit. So we went to the bathroom, and then we heard it. And just we're sitting in the bathroom. My brother's holding the door, trying to close the door, and it wouldn't close because of all the suction. We could hear windows crashing, wood smashing, just the apartment getting ripped apart. And then next thing I know, the first thing I smelled was the smell of pine from everything getting ripped up around us. And so that will forever be linked to any time I smell pine associated with the tornado. But yeah, that's where I was when the storm hit. What do you remember most about the storm?
The most I remember is just this, it's a weird sense of helplessness. Like you were talking about, with your tweet, in the past you see these kind of storms and you never really think about them because, even I remember the April 8th, 1998 storm, but it didn't hit anything I knew. I saw the aerial coverage of it. I saw all that, but it wasn't anything I knew. You can't go, well, I've been there. I have seen this. I've literally stood in this building. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing that storm hit and watching it, and literally as it kind of just roamed off, this weird sense of helplessness, because all I wanted to do at that point was be down there. It's kind of like one of those things where you want to be there to help. You don't know how, you don't know what you can even do, but you want to help. And that was, that's what was going through my head at the time, is I didn't know what to do. I remember watching it, and then my power went out. So my last image is that storm. And, I immediately, I started trying to call my friends down there. Can't get through to anyone. And I debated, I was maybe I drive down there. I'm I can't drive down there. That's stupid. Because you don't know. First off, I don't know what the weather's like anyway, going down there. So I just remember up until the day after, this huge helplessness feeling. You were down there, so what in the world do you remember the most about it?
I have a pretty good memory, I'd like to say, but things about that day, I remember the smallest details about that day and the days after. After it hit, my brother and I remember he walked out of the bathroom and just said, oh my gosh, wow, our front door was, basically our front room was blown inside. And then we looked out, and the entire second story of our complex was basically gone. And we walked out, and I tried calling my parents. I called my grandparents, and I think I eventually got through to one of them and told them to call my parents and let them know that we're alive, but we've been hit. And I just remember just random sights, random people. I think their names are Derek and Susan DeBruin. They were lived in the complex with us, and they were out and about after the storm. They put on their, I guess, hiking, rock climbing helmets and gear and put on boots and were going door to door, trying to, on the second story, see if there was anybody inside. They fixed up a dog who had been cut, I believe, on the neck. They put I don't know whether it was a tourniquet or something, but they put a bandage over it. And then I remember this woman, she had her grandchildren, I'm assuming, and she was frantic and screaming, and as tons of people were. And I remember she handed them to some people to take them. If my memory serves me correctly, I believe she told them to take them to the street. But she ran over to our apartment, and she looked up above our apartment and started screaming, "My baby, my baby, my baby. He lives there." And her son lived above our apartment, and she wasn't sure if he was there. He was supposed to be home by the time the tornado had hit. I believe he got off work at 4. And she was just, I'll forever remember just her wailing and screaming, "My baby, my baby," as she looked up above our apartments where, from the best that we could tell, the only thing remaining were floorboards. But yeah, and then from there, we went inside and grabbed some clothes. We were fortunate. We lost a lot of stuff in the tornado, but we didn't lose a lot of stuff because our stuff was just strewn away, like many places and many homes were. We were fortunate to be on the first story, and this particular part of the complex wasn't completely leveled. So we did lose stuff because you don't plan for a tornado, so you obviously can't take everything with you when you move out, when they tell you to come get whatever belongings you can. But we were able to get some clothes and put them into a backpack and get our social security cards, our birth certificates, the important things. And we walked to University Village. We began walking because we didn't know. We heard there was another storm. So we put them in a box, started walking, walked over a gate that had been blown down. Some people in University Village pushed it down so my brother and I could walk over it and get in. And we're just walking around, and I turned around. Had no clue where I was going. I was just trying to find shelter because I knew there was another storm coming, apparently. And I turned around the corner, and I guess a miracle, I see a friend that I knew. And he rushed to me, and he said, "Are you okay? Can I help you?" And he saw that we were carrying a backpack and a box of clothes, or in a box. And I said, "We just need shelter." So we went to his apartment, and we stayed there for a good while. I had stepped on a nail that had gone through my boot, or my shoe, and through my foot, and it was bleeding. And one of the kind ladies there washed my foot off and cleaned that. And we stayed there for a long time, and a lot of them went outside to check if they could help other people. But yeah, I mean, I could go on, and I just remember everything about that day.
You remember a lot about the day. What about after? Like, what was the aftermath of it to you? Like April 28th, 29th, all those days.
Well, that day after, two kind souls, the night of the tornado, when we were staying in the shelter, my friend Kathy, who became my friend that day, I did not know her before that, she let us stay at her apartment, and we didn't want to be, we were all scared. We didn't want to be alone, so I called my friend Matt, and we decided we were going to try and make it to campus, and I was going to stay with Matt in his dorm. And it took us probably about 2 hours to get from University Village to campus because everything was shut down. So we slept over at his place, and then the next day we were embarking on a journey to meet my sister, and they were going to take us to the apartment to see what we could salvage. And I just remember walking down the hill from 10th Avenue towards 27th Street, and it was like a scene from an apocalyptic movie. just people roaming everywhere with no real sense of direction. They're just in awe of what was around them, just complete devastation. And we weren't allowed into our complex because there was the laundry room was still leaking gas. They didn't want us anywhere near there, so we ended up leaving and coming straight to my grandparents' house in Birmingham, and then went back down the next day. But those first couple days afterwards were just, it really was like a scene out of a movie. You hear people say that, and they're like, this only happens in the movies, or it seemed like a movie. It did seem like a movie. Just people roaming among the devastation and just not knowing what to do or how to react. But then at the same time, there was the kind-heartedness. You said you felt helpless and you just wanted to help. There were people there that day from some church over at Rosedale, a place that was just leveled. Like it was nothing left of it. And they were grilling out and handing these people who had no food and no clothes, giving them food, giving them water, asking if they needed help, finding anything if they could, going through the rubble. There were so many kind-hearted people out there just wanting to lend a helping hand. That's what I remember from the immediate aftermath. For you, though, you were not necessarily down there when it hit. So, what was it like for you?
Before that, you were saying everyone helps. I just want to, doubt he'll ever hear it, but I want to shout out to my buddy Evan Salter, who was down there. Mm-hmm. And I remember he was one of the ones I tried to get in contact with, and I couldn't. And it was because it wasn't because he was helpless. He literally, without even thinking about it, went into this help mode. And he has this big red truck. And I remember the one image I saw of him was that truck filled with just packs and packs and packs of water. And he was just going around and trying to pass those out to people. And it was a reaction. The aftermath to me, I remember two things most. The day after, I came into work and immediately went downstairs to news and asked how I could help. I wasn't in the news department yet, but I wanted to help, and I didn't know how, because we have to get information out there. We have to do all we can. So I was basically, they said that they would put me on crews for Friday and Saturday and Sunday. So until then, that Thursday, I still wanted to do something. And I remember going back upstairs, and some of the people I worked with were talking about giving blood. I had never given blood in my life, and it wasn't because I didn't want to. I just never thought about it. And that was the first time in my life I didn't even hesitate. I was like, I have to give blood. And that day was the first day I ever gave blood for this. And I remember getting down there, that Saturday is the day that sticks out the most, being down there and walking around 15th Street and walking around the area, around the Hobby Lobby and all that. And the week before, it was Easter. We're recording this on Easter. And it was like that year that Easter fell the week before. I was down there because a bunch of friends were coming in town. We had a bunch of people from, because I had graduated by then. A lot of my friends had graduated, and we all had moved off. And a lot of people were coming in town for the weekend. And so I was down there. I went down there that Friday, and I was just really tired because I'd been working all day. And we all got together, and we went to this party on 15th Street. And I just remember I was staying at another friend's apartment further down 15th Street. And I was like, you know what, guys, have fun, hang out here. I'm just going to walk back. And it's something I used to always do, just you kind of walk up and down 15th Street. And so I started walking back up 15th Street. And I'm a Ben Folds fan. And there's a lyric in one of his songs where he says people get nostalgic about the last 10 years before the last 10 years have passed. That's the feeling I had at that moment, because I'm walking down the street, seeing all these buildings, not realizing it's going to be the last time I see him, but I'm kind of overwhelmed with just nostalgia of how much I remember everything and all this. And then cut to a week later, I'm down there on the same place, standing in the same area, and these buildings are gone, and people's lives have been lost. And I ran into this guy, Matt Wilson, who was a UA junior at the time, who worked in Big Lots, and he was in this area going to get his truck back. And I was just asking him about, how it was. And he was at work when the big tornado hit. And they all got into, and we're standing in front of the Hobby Lobby. And there's pictures of this. I have pictures of this. You'll find them on our website. We're standing in front of this Hobby Lobby. And they went to this closet. Big Lots, they went into this closet. when the twister hit. The only thing that was still standing was the closet they were in. It's just nuts.
And now, obviously, we've both been back to Tuscaloosa. I lived there for a couple more years after the storm, and for me, going back to those areas after the storm hit, even after 6 months later, but even still like 3 years later, it's different. While the city has changed and it has grown up out of the rubble and has really rebuilt itself very well, it's still very real when you travel down 15th Street or you even travel down 10th Avenue towards Rosedale. Rosedale is now a much nicer looking community than it was before, but there's still areas that are just not built up at all. Alberta City, Holt as a whole pretty much still looks like the storm came through yesterday. Just, have you been down there, and what have you seen, and what have you experienced, I guess, emotionally in the years after? Because for me, going to those areas is still a very real, like, this happened, and I still think about it when I'm around those areas.
I would go down there. I went down there a lot because I still had a lot of people that lived down there. And then obviously the football season came. And every time you'd go, it'd be a little different. There would be a little less rubble. About a year later, you started seeing some new buildings pop up, but that feeling was never going to go away. And, I would look at areas and go, I stood right there and saw this person's house entirely blown down. You met people who were just trying to find some semblance of their lives, like a photo gallery. Because you think about, they lost their house. A lot of these people lost their memories. Like, they just wanted to find something to remember their lives before that storm. And I look at areas now where, there's a giant condo where that stood. But to me, that's still the area where I remember seeing that stuff. And it's not going to change it. It's never going to go away. Like, you rebuild, and it's great. And I love that Tuscaloosa is being able to do that. But there's always going to be, especially traveling through Alberta City, which is nowhere near the contradiction of how much Tuscaloosa has been able to grow back versus Alberta is so that to me is your ultimate reminder, because you can go through Tuscaloosa even if you never saw it, and you can see what Tuscaloosa is now. But if you end up getting off on that exit and you start going towards Alberta, you'll get reminded very quickly what that storm did to this area.
But I mean, as a whole, that day affected a lot of communities across the state of Alabama, and a lot of progress has been made. And we're talking about Tuscaloosa just because that's the connection we both have to the storms, really. But a lot of other cities were impacted by this, and they've been able to make great progress too. And I think it's just a testament to the kind-heartedness and just Alabamians as a whole have just really banded together over these past 3 years, and even in the greatest time of need, those first couple weeks after the storm, it was just magnificent to see that everybody was coming together for the common goal, that we were going to get through this, and we are going to rebuild, and we are going to get back to the way it was. And I think that can be seen even more so today just by how much progress has been made.
Yeah, you talk about trying to find the silver lining in these kind of situations, and obviously there's going to be certain things that it's never going to be the same. But you're right, there is a sense of community. Like, the idea that this state, a huge chunk of this state, because we focus a lot on Tuscaloosa, but a lot of the state was hurt by that. And to see kind of what areas have done to come together, to help each other out, to help a neighbor out, really without even asking, just not even a second's thought. And to see it still kind of be that way now, like you think about it that it goes away really quickly. No, it's still like that 3 years later in a lot of these areas.
Final thoughts on the storm. I mean, 3 years later, hard to believe, hard to comprehend really, even for me, that I remember last year I was writing a 2 years later piece, and that was hard for me to believe that it had been 2 years since this major event in my life had happened. But 3 years later, thoughts on the progress of Tuscaloosa and just where we go from here.
It's basically taking the good with the bad is probably the best way I can put it, because being able to see so many communities rebound and start to kind of get back to normal or a different kind of normal, as we've heard from some of the stories that we've been working on all week. You're never going to be able to forget it, and especially people like you, Josh, who were there, who was in the city, and then even people like me who I wasn't in the storm, but it hit places that I know and that I grew up in. You're never going to be able to forget it, but to be able to see, I, in a weird way, it kind of restored some faith in people that I had lost, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, and this is kind of a stupid thing, but I remember this was right after the poisoning of tumors with Harvey Updike, and there was that whole big thing about that. But I remember how quickly just Auburn University jumped in to help on April 27th, and it's the biggest thing the state has in terms of a rivalry, and for that moment in time, we were the same. And to me, that is something that is just a wonderful feeling to see, and it's the community and seeing people help people.
Tumors for Tide, Tide for Tumors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great thing to see, and I think people really got to see the true heart of the people of Alabama in the time after that storm. You can find a lot of our content throughout this week, as I mentioned before.
Starting Thursday.
Starting Thursday on CBS42.com. I am working on a couple of pieces. We have some other stuff planned.
Yeah, I will have an article that will come out this week where we sat down with a few University of Alabama seniors who were freshmen at the time. That really puts the timing in perspective of just 3 years really has flown by. But just to get their perspectives of the storm and how the city is now, and that'll be on the website.
So you can check that out. We appreciate you joining us here today on the Room for Improvement podcast on CBS42.com. We will be back next week to guide you through another topic yet to be determined, but we'll keep that a surprise for next week. And for Sebastian, I am Josh Zavadil, and we will see you next time.